You're single, so you don't need a house this big, Jenny. We're family. Of course it should be shared, right? My mother Diane's voice spilled casually from my smartphone speaker, as lighthearted as if she were discussing tomorrow's dinner plans. She knew perfectly well that it was the day I was moving into my new home, yet she said it so matter-of-factly over the phone. An hour earlier, I had pulled my car up in front of the long-awaited glass-walled mansion perched on the slopes of Oakwood Hills. It was the move-in day for my $1 million sanctuary, the reward I had earned after 6 years of sweat-soaked, mud-stained effort. Normally, this should have been a radiant moment. The moving truck arriving with my belongings, the symbolic start of a new chapter in my life. Instead, what greeted me was something I never could have imagined. Parked in my driveway was a massive moving truck I didn't recognize, and the workers hustling back and forth weren't carrying my things. A faded sofa, a gaudy gold display cabinet with atrocious taste. There was no doubt about it. The furniture belonged to my sister Lucy's house. More to the right. Don't scratch it. This is my new office and home, you know. The arrogant shout echoing from the terrace belonged to my brother-in-law, Steve. A self-proclaimed CEO whose business hadn't made a cent yet. He was barking orders as if this mansion had been his all along. Through the vast glass wall of the living room, I could see Lucy chasing her 3 children around. They were running across the solid wood floors I had just custom finished. Floors that still smelled of fresh wax, with their shoes on. I couldn't get out of the car. Before anger could take over, a sharp sense of observation cut through their sheer selfishness. With trembling fingers, I pressed the record button on my phone and quietly began documenting this unbelievable invasion. The moving checklist on my dashboard looked painfully absurd in the face of this grotesque scene. At last, I stepped out of the car and walked, one step, then another, toward my sanctuary. "Hey, you there? You're in the way. Move!" One of the movers yelled at me, assuming I was just an outsider. I ignored him, strode through the front door, and marched straight into the living room. There, on top of the Italian quartz kitchen island I had spent months selecting, sat greasy fast food bags. And right beside them sat Lucy, holding a glass. "Oh, Jenny, you're here already. I was hoping to make it a surprise. Did Mom tell you?" Lucy greeted me with a beaming smile, completely unapologetic. "Lucy, what is going on here? Why is your furniture being moved into my house? Why are your kids running around inside my home?" My voice came out lower than I expected, even to myself. "What do you mean, what's going on? Didn't Mom explain? You weren't seriously planning to live alone in a house this big, were you? That would be such a waste. We've been struggling because our current place doesn't have enough bedrooms for the kids. And Steve said that to launch his new business, he needed an address that looks more successful. We're family. It's only natural to help each other out, right?" Her tone made it sound as if they were doing me a favor by using my house. Behind her, Lucy's children pressed their mud-covered hands against the custom glass wall I had just installed. "I never agreed to anything like this. Take all the furniture outside immediately. Tell the movers to stop." When I said this firmly, Steve, who had been on the terrace, walked into the room with a scowl. Hey, Jenny. Don't get so worked up. We're family, aren't we? Sure, you might be paying the mortgage, but it's our job to make good use of this amazing environment. If I invite my clients here, my business will take off in no time. And when it does, I'll even pay you some maintenance fees." Maintenance fees? I was speechless. The $1 million I had earned by working without sleep, being yelled at by male workers on construction sites, and clawing my way up 1 cent at a time. To them, it was nothing more than a prop for their business. They didn't see me as a person at all. I was just a convenient wallet, a provider of empty rooms. Steve didn't seem to realize how shameless his words were. If anything, he looked smug, as though he were generously offering me a benefit. As I stood frozen in the center of the living room, movers passed by carrying a massive refrigerator. It was an old, battered model from Lucy's house. Watching it come dangerously close to scraping my custom kitchen cabinets, I finally broke my silence. "Lucy, Steve, how did you even get into this house in the first place? I locked the front door myself last night, right after I received the keys from the realtor. At my question, Lucy stopped giving instructions to the movers and smiled, a triumphant smile tinged with unmistakable contempt. She pulled a single key from her pocket, dangling from a familiar keychain, and deliberately waved it in front of my eyes. This key? I got it from Mom. She said, Jenny is so busy with work that she probably won't have time to prepare for the move. So you, her family, should go in first and get the house ready for living. It felt like I'd been struck in the head with a blunt object. That key was the one I had reluctantly handed over to my mother a few weeks earlier, after she had persistently begged for it. So I can help clean when you're not home and water your plants, she had said, practically forcing me to give her a spare key. I never imagined she would hand it straight to my sister and her husband, and use it to let them occupy my house before me, on the very day I was supposed to move in. With shaking hands, I pulled out my phone and called my mother immediately. The call didn't even ring twice before she picked up, her cheerful voice filling the speaker. Oh, Jenny, have you arrived at your new place already? Lucy and her family should be there helping you out. Surprised? Surprised? Why did you give Lucy the key to my house? They're moving their furniture in without my permission. Make them stop right now. At what was almost a scream of protest, my mother's tone instantly shifted into that of a parent lecturing a stubborn child. Jenny, calm down. You really only think about yourself, don't you? You don't need a house that big. Just maintaining it will be a burden. Lucy has 3 children, and Steve's new business needs a respectable address to attract investors. This is a chance for the whole family. It's incredibly selfish of you to monopolize that house all by yourself. Business? Have you forgotten how many times Lucy and Steve have failed before? And how much of your retirement savings they burned through? The crypto crash. That fancy restaurant that went bankrupt. Every single time you asked me to pitch in too, didn't you? When I said that, Steve, who had been listening nearby, turned bright red. He pointed a finger at me and cut in aggressively. Hey, don't drag up the past. That was just the market behaving unpredictably. It had nothing to do with my abilities. This time is different. My AI consulting business is already catching the attention of Silicon Valley investors. I can't meet them using some rundown rental apartment address. I need the Oakwood Hills brand. Lucy stepped forward as well, as if to back him up. That's right, Jenny. Sharing this house is your natural duty as a family member. More than half the truck is already unloaded, and we've started the kids' school transfer paperwork. What are you talking about? This is my house. I paid for it. No, Jenny. Even the money you earned ultimately comes from the fact that we raised you and paid for your education. That means your assets are the family's assets too. Lucy and Steve are already preparing to give up their current house. The facts are already in place. With that, my mother hung up on me, unilaterally. In the suddenly silent living room, I watched as Lucy and Steve casually began discussing room layouts, as if everything were settled. They had planned for my resistance from the start. By moving their belongings in before I arrived and creating a situation that was too far along to undo, they were convinced I would eventually give in. This was the final form of the exploitation they had subjected me to for years, unfolding right in front of my eyes. My job as a landscape architect is not the elegant profession people imagine, planting pretty flowers in neat beds. My battlefield has always been construction sites, mud, dust, and towering heavy machinery. In male-dominated environments, every time I completed a difficult project, my hands grew rougher, the dirt beneath my nails permanently ingrained. I never took vacations. I never bought designer clothes. I saved every cent, every dollar as funds to buy back my freedom. And what about Lucy and Steve, who labeled my success as surplus family money? Steve called himself a visionary entrepreneur, but in reality, he was a massive vacuum cleaner, endlessly sucking up his in-laws' retirement savings. A few years ago, he poured tens of thousands of dollars into next-generation cryptocurrency mining. Then he opened an ultimate luxury vegan restaurant, which shut down after just 3 months. Each time my mother called me. Jenny, you have money, don't you? Lucy and Steve are just struggling with cash flow temporarily. Helping them is a natural investment for family. Once Steve succeeds, he'll pay you back many times over. My father's retirement money, saved over decades of work, was steadily drained away for their reckless dreams, and now my parents' savings were nearly gone. And yet, in their eyes, the successful daughter who worked hard and lived responsibly was worth less than the glamorous eldest daughter and son in law who dreamed big and failed repeatedly. I was always the safety net of the family. Jenny is doing fine, but Lucy and Steve need us. That twisted form of love had cornered me for years. They never celebrated my independence. Instead, they resented it, seeing my owning a home and breaking free from their control as a betrayal of the family or hoarding assets. Buying the house in Oakwood Hills wasn't just a real estate purchase. It was the biggest gamble of my life, a permanent escape from their ecosystem of exploitation. Hey, Jenny, are you listening? Lucy's voice pulled me back to reality. She tapped the custom quartz counter I had just installed with her dirty fingers. I think this space would be perfect for the kids' homework desks. You can just move your work equipment to the basement storage room, right? At that moment, the final switch inside my mind quietly flipped. They probably didn't notice the faint upward curve at the corners of my lips. They were convinced I was standing there in shock, frozen, and that a single phone call from my mother had been enough to make me submit. Lucy was cheerfully discussing furniture placement with Steve, while Steve was already lounging in the bedroom he planned to turn into his CEO suite, gazing smugly out the window. But what I had learned over the past 6 years wasn't just how to work with soil and create beautiful landscapes. I had learned a far colder discipline: always assume the worst, and build multiple layers of legal defense. In fact, a few weeks before the purchase of this house was finalized, when my mother showed up at my apartment and relentlessly asked for a spare key, saying, "I just want to help clean when you're not home," alarms were already blaring in my head. I knew her patterns well. If I refused, she would cry and accuse me of not trusting family. If I stood my ground, she would tell every relative that I was a selfish, willful single woman. That was precisely why I smiled and said, "All right, Mom, that would be a big help," and handed her a key. But that key was not just a key. That very same day, I visited the office of a highly skilled attorney specializing in property law, Peter Morgan. "Mr. Morgan, there is a possibility that my family will attempt to occupy my new home against my will. If that happens, I intend to show zero leniency. Please prepare a formal trespass warning and immediate eviction order in advance." I provided copies of the deed bearing only my name, bank statements proving the property had been paid for entirely with my own funds, and a signed affidavit clearly stating that no one else was permitted to enter the property under any circumstances. At that moment, that heavy envelope was sitting inside the bag slung over my shoulder. "Hey, Jenny, are you listening? Steve says we should order catering tonight. We need to throw a little housewarming party, right? You'll cover the bill, of course. It's a move-in celebration." Lucy peered into my face, already counting on me to foot the bill. The moment I saw that expression, my internal waiting period ended. I didn't answer her. I calmly took out my smartphone. Then I tapped another number saved on the speed dial. Not a catering company, not my mother, the police station, and the direct line of Attorney Morgan, who had already been briefed on the situation. "Yes, it's me. Yes, a structural violation has been identified. Please proceed immediately." As soon as I said that, Steve turned toward me with a puzzled look. "Hey, who are you talking to? A violation? Is there something wrong with this house?" "Oh, yes. A very big problem, Steve. Lucy." I reached into my bag and pulled out a pristine white envelope. The moment Lucy saw the logo printed on the front, Morgan Law Offices, the color drained from her face. "There is a rule in this house. Nothing is allowed to exist here without my permission. Not even a piece of trash. You crossed that boundary." In the distance, sirens began to wail, slicing through the quiet of the upscale neighborhood. Red lights reflected against the glass walls, drawing closer through the falling dusk. "What is this? What's going on?" Steve rushed to the window and froze. His fantasy of a successful man's mansion shattered instantly as three uniformed police officers stepped onto the lawn. A loud knock echoed through the house. Police, we received a report. Is anyone inside? Before I could open the door, Lucy rushed forward. She forced a desperate smile onto her face and greeted the officers like a wronged citizen. Oh, officers, thank goodness you're here. There's been a suspicious person lurking around the house. Well, this is actually my sister. She's a bit mentally unstable and is trying to interfere with our move. It's all under control. We'll calm her down. She pointed at me and put on a pitiful little performance. The officers scanned the living room. The piles of old furniture, the confused movers, and finally, me, standing silently. I'm the homeowner, Steve Watson, a newly relocated CEO in this area. I apologize for my sister-in-law causing trouble. Steve stepped forward boldly and even tried to offer a handshake. The officer ignored his hand completely and locked eyes with me. Are you the one who made the call? Yes. I stepped forward. From the envelope, I laid 3 documents onto the table. Quietly, deliberately, with undeniable finality. My name is Jenny Ford. I am the sole legal owner of this property. These are notarized copies of the deed, proof that the house was purchased entirely with my personal funds. And this... I held up the 3rd document. A formal notice of trespass and demand for immediate removal, signed by Attorney Morgan. Today, individuals who were explicitly denied permission to enter this address took advantage of my absence, unlawfully entered the property, and moved their personal belongings inside. I demanded that they leave immediately, but they refused. Therefore, I am formally requesting police-enforced removal. The officer took the documents and began reading them carefully, page by page. For several long minutes, the living room fell into complete silence. I could see the color draining rapidly from Lucy's and Steve's faces. According to this deed, the sole owner of this property is Jenny Ford. The officer looked up and turned a cold, piercing gaze on Lucy and Steve. Your names do not appear anywhere. This is not your house. That can't be right. We got the key from our mother. We have a legitimate reason, Lucy screamed. The officer's voice dropped even lower, sharper than before. Possession of a key does not establish ownership. Once the legal owner tells you to leave, remaining on the premises constitutes trespassing. Stop the movers immediately and return all belongings to the truck. If you refuse, you will be arrested on the spot. Arrested? Steve whispered, his voice trembling. In that instant, his pride as a so-called CEO shattered completely against the immovable wall of the law. I watched their despair with icy calm. Move the items back to the truck now. Fail to comply, and you will be escorted to the station. The words cut sharply through the cold air of the living room. The hired movers, fully intimidated by the presence of the police, wasted no time. Clearly eager to avoid being dragged into trouble, they immediately began loading the furniture, items they had just carried in, back onto the truck. Wait, we're not done yet, stop! Lucy shrieked, half hysterical, trying to block them. The officer stepped between her and the workers. Ma'am, step back. They're making the correct decision. You should gather your personal belongings and exit the property as well. Immediately. That was when it happened. At the entrance to the driveway, a car screeched to a sudden stop. My mother jumped out and ran toward the house at full speed. Jenny, what do you think you're doing? She shouted as she burst inside. I came to check on the move and nearly had a heart attack when I saw police cars outside. Call them off right now. Aren't you ashamed dragging a family matter into public like this? She glared at me and tried to snatch the copies of the deed from my hands, but the officer stopped her. Mom, the one behaving shamefully here isn't me. It's you. My voice remained calm. This is my house. My sanctuary. The one I paid for. You're the one who handed out the key without permission and let people break in like thieves. You created the need to call the police by ignoring my warnings and trying to force a fait accompli. Thieves? How dare you speak to your own mother like that? She then turned to the officers. Plastering on the refined smile she had perfected over decades, she tried to take control with practiced charm. Officers, I'm terribly sorry. My daughter is under a lot of stress from work and isn't thinking clearly. This house was planned for our family's future. She purchased it on our behalf, but in reality, it belongs to all of us. I'm the one who holds the key legitimately. The officer didn't so much as twitch an eyebrow. Ma'am, these documents list only one owner, Jenny Ford. And the owner herself has explicitly stated that she does not permit entry. No matter who you gave the key to, or why, that does not override legal ownership. All furniture currently inside this property constitutes evidence of unlawful occupation. Remove it immediately. That's impossible. You're lying. Jenny, call your father. He won't allow this. My mother's voice cracked into a shrill scream, echoing through the open windows and across the quiet luxury neighborhood. I could see neighbors peering through curtains, watching from their immaculate homes. Officer, please, just wait a little longer. Taking everything out like this is humiliating. The neighbors are all watching. Lucy yelled, her face burning red. The officer pointed calmly at his watch. If you're concerned about time, you'd better start helping yourselves. If everything isn't cleared out within 15 minutes, you will be taken in for trespassing. This is not a threat. At that final ultimatum, Steve finally broke. My reputation. Groaning under his breath, he grabbed the gaudy, overpriced chair he'd forced into the house and hurried it back to the truck like a man trying to escape. This was the structural collapse I had intended. For years, within the closed system called family, they had treated me as a convenient wallet, justifying their selfishness with the phrase family bonds. Now, that filthy power dynamic was being exposed in broad daylight, under the authority of the police and the cold, judging eyes of the neighborhood. Lucy noticed the nearby wives watching from their windows and hurriedly hid her face, shoving her children's scattered toys into trash bags. The pride of the woman who had declared only hours earlier that this house belongs to the family was completely gone. Jenny, you're truly frightening. What do you think you're doing putting your own family through something like this? In her eyes, I was no longer her daughter, only a wicked woman who had turned her back on her family. I only protected myself, Mom. From today on, I can finally live in peace. There will be no more uninvited guests in my life. No more parasites trying to steal the fruits of my labor. Parasites? I loved you and raised you. The love you talk about always came with a price. You funneled the money I earned into covering Steve's failures. You took my time to raise Lucy's children. You tried to use my home to satisfy their vanity. That isn't love. It's exploitation. And there will be no more exploiting me. I pulled another document from my bag and held it out in front of her. This is a draft of a no-contact order issued through Attorney Morgan addressed to all of you. It will be formally served tomorrow. If any of you set foot on my property again or harass me by phone or message even once, I will take immediate legal action. This is your final warning. My mother stared at the paper in disbelief, her strength draining away as if she might collapse on the spot. The last box was loaded onto the truck, and the rear gate slammed shut with a harsh metallic bang. Steve and Lucy didn't even have the dignity to hurl a final insult. They climbed into their car and drove off. True silence finally settled over the house. Then my phone began to vibrate violently in my hand. The screen read, Dad. Jenny, have you lost your mind? Calling the police on your own sister and her young children? You're the lowest of the low. The story that you sold out your family to the police has already spread through the relatives. Call Lucy back right now and apologize. It was a declaration of exile and a threat, wielding the weapon he believed I feared most. Public opinion. The old me would have been consumed by burning guilt. Instead, I exhaled slowly and began to move my fingers. I blocked every single family contact. A few days later, the physical defenses were complete as well. All recovered spare keys were destroyed. At the front door, I installed a top-tier biometric security system. Only my fingerprint and my iris could grant access to this sanctuary. Through Attorney Morgan, I formally served every family member with a legally binding no-contact order. If any of them set foot on my property again, they would be arrested on the spot. No loopholes, no escape. Months passed. Through relatives, I heard how things had turned out. Lucy and Steve, the couple who had tried to force their way into my home by creating a fait accompli, were being crammed into a rundown, cheap apartment on the outskirts of town. Steve's next generation business collapsed completely after word spread among investors that he had caused a police incident in an upscale neighborhood. My parents, too, reaped what they had sown. After years of sacrificing one daughter for the sake of others, they were isolated in their community, whispered about as parents who had been disgraced by the very daughter they exploited. As for me, I now live in my $1 million sanctuary with my beloved dog, Max. The foundation of my life will never shake again. I no longer need to carve pieces out of myself to meet other people's expectations. I no longer need to sacrifice my resources to repair a broken family. A massive glass wall stretched from the floor to the ceiling. Every inch of this clear, open view is proof of the freedom I claimed with my own hands.